often struggling to find a secure job and enough money to provide for yourself. Now add on 3 children. Next, consider growing up in an abusive and threatening environment created by the people who were supposed to protect you. Finally, consider watching your lifestyle take a toll on your child's life, just as it did yours. This is the life of Desiree Metcalf. Pam Fessler, for the National Public Radio, published an article on May 7th of 2014 that showcased the life of Desiree Metcalf. Desiree is a 24-year-old who dreams of becoming a nursing assistant and providing for her family. Unfortunately, the poverty that she's grown up in since she was a child has made this task extremely difficult. Importantly, Desiree's story is just one of a growing number of experiences of poverty in the United States. With the gap between the wealthy and the poor continuing to grow, combating the cycle of poverty is of growing concern. Today, I am here to talk to you about the issue of child poverty in the United States and present just one way that society can combat its effects. Research has shown that poverty has a variety of adverse effects on children that makes it harder to escape its grasps. These studies reveal that children in poverty experience higher rates of violence and abuse, lower rates of education, and are afforded less opportunities and advantages to break the cycle of poverty. I propose that schools make it a priority to not only offer a solid education to these children, but to also provide them with the support system that they may lack at home. Therefore, it is necessary that schools develop programs that foster an environment of learning and provide a safe haven to children in need. To begin, to understand the problem of child poverty in the United States, it's important to understand the issue of poverty in general. According to the Stanford Center of Poverty and Inequality's Poverty and Inequality Report of 2014, 15% of Americans live in poverty. This statistic is one of the worst in the past 13 years, and without interventions could cause serious problems for the American population. But perhaps even more surprising and concerning than the poverty rate of Americans in general is the rate that this poverty affects children. According to the U.S. Census Bureau in 2013, the rate of poverty for ages 18 to 64 was 13.4%. However, the poverty rate for people under the age of 18 was 19.9%. In fact, the poverty rate for people under the age of 18 was the highest rate included in the data table. In general, 21.8% of children live in poverty, according to the Poverty and Equality Report of 2014 from Stanford. Therefore, more and more children are being sucked into the grasp of poverty, and this poverty creates a vicious cycle. Poverty can be affected by various factors such as unemployment, income inequality, and wealth inequality. According to Karen Kosanovich and Elena Theodosiou-Sherman's article, Trends in Long-Term Unemployment for the Bureau of Labor Statistics in March of 2015, of the fourth quarter of 2014, 2.8 million Americans were long-term unemployed. This means that these people have been looking for jobs for 27 weeks or longer. With extreme long-term unemployment at a historical high and long-term unemployment increasing with age, more and more people who need to provide for their families are being affected by unemployment. And this unemployment is having various effects on children. Unemployment and poverty in general can have various effects on one's quality of life. Without a stable income to afford good housing, many people resolve to living in cheaper housing. These poor neighborhoods are prone to higher rates of violence. We often hear of violence on the news, but the hidden story is that violence is very much a part of daily life for many poor children. Harper High School in Englewood, Chicago is just one example of a district where violence is very much a part of daily life. This American Life had a 2-part podcast story on this high school that currently had lost 29 past or present students in the year of 2012. This violence was mostly related to gangs, which, when analyzing the dynamics of Englewood, is not surprising. These children grew up in gang violence and associated being a part of a gang as normal as just being born. Poorer neighborhoods also provide poor educational opportunities, and education is becoming increasingly important. According to the Stanford Poverty and Inequality Report of 2014, unemployment rates for people with less than a high school level education was 15% in 2010. However, for college graduates, this percentage was only 4.7%. Therefore, many less educated poor people settle for minimum wage jobs. But minimum wage is not enough to support oneself. Barbara Einrich, in her article Nickel and Dimed on Not Getting By in America in 2001, immersed herself within the life of a minimum wage worker. And after working 2 jobs for 1 month and immersing herself in the stressful environment and degrading treatment, she found that it is not only financially impossible, but psychologically demeaning to try to support oneself on minimum wage. Therefore, it's becoming harder for children and less educated people to find good, stable jobs, and for older people without a college education to support their families. With the growth of technology and social media, there are many current movements out there in the world to combat poverty. There are international and national efforts, but poverty is a serious national issue that must also be confronted on a local level. The question is how? The research I will now address seeks to examine the root causes and effects of poverty, as well as the best way to improve child poverty. Research has been conducted to determine the causes and implications of poverty. Nicholas Apergis, Aguzan Dinser, and James E. Payne, in their research on the dynamics of poverty and income inequality in the U.S. states in 2011, examined whether poverty and inequality have a relationship in both the long and short run, and whether this relationship is unidirectional or bidirectional. They used data from all 50 states from the years 1980 to 2004. And what they found is that there is a bidirectional relationship between poverty and income inequality in both the long and the short run. Therefore, poverty is increased by income inequality and unemployment rates. And income inequality and unemployment rates lower personal income and levels of education. Similarly, Mary Corcoran and Martha S. Hill conducted research called Unemployment and Poverty in 1980. And they studied the relationship between unemployment and poverty. They used data from the panel study of income dynamics from 1968 to 1977 and studied 1,251 men from the age ranges of 35 to 64 who were heads of households and labor participants. What they found was that the number of people living in poverty could have been reduced by a significant 10% if all unemployed heads of households had been eliminated. Therefore, adequate education is pivotal for children to break free from the grasp of poverty and get a good, stable job. Additionally, Carolyn Ratcliffe and Signe Mary McKernan, in their research Child Poverty and Its Lasting Consequences in 2012, used data from the panel study of income dynamics from 1968 to 2009 to study the effects of poverty on children. What they found is that poverty has various effects on children. They even found a link from parents' educational levels to the persistence of poverty for children. In fact, they said that poor children with parents with only a high school diploma are 17% more likely to be persistently poor if they are white and 24% more likely to be persistently poor if they are black. Going off of their research, Gary W. Evans, in his research The Environment of Child Poverty in 2004, studied both the emotional and physical effects of poverty. What he found was that poor children are less likely to be supported by parents, have access to books and internet, receive a good education, and be involved in extracurricular activities. They are more likely to live in broken homes, experience violence, and live in instability. They are subjected to higher rates of violence and harsh punishment, and this environment has a direct effect on the child's development and the environment that they grow up in. Following off of Evans' research, Annette Lareau expanded on the effects of childhood poverty in her research Invisible Inequality, Social Class, and Childbearing in Black Families and White Families in 2002. What she found is that there is a correlation between social class and its effects on childbearing practices. She found that middle-class parents engage in a form of concerted cultivation, in which they encourage their children to develop a form of self through extracurricular activities and also their parents' involvement, where working-class and poor parents engage in a form of natural growth, in which they more or less allow their children to develop on their own. Therefore, middle-class children emerge with a sense of worth and entitlement that poor children do not, which therefore furthers the gap of social disparity between poor children and upper-class children. Following off of Evans' research, Richard J. Gellis also focused and expanded on the influence of violence in childhood poverty in his research Poverty and Violence Toward Children in 1992. He found that poor children are more likely to experience violence and abuse, both in the home and in their surrounding environment. Therefore, they're more likely to form future abusive relationships, perpetuating the cycle of violence, and this also affects their education performance and success. Lastly, Paula O. Zawiski-Kubulius and Dana L. Thompson, in their research Gifted Programming for Poor and Minority Urban Students, Issues and Lessons Learned in 2010, further expanded on the effects of child poverty. They studied disadvantages and disparities in educational opportunities, and they found that this lack of representation of low-income children in gifted programs comes from lack of opportunities from school districts, lack of family support, racial tensions, and also a lack of knowledge of the resources offered to these children. This effect is most heavily felt by urban communities and African Americans who are underrepresented by about 55%. Therefore, it's necessary that schools offer better educational opportunities to offer these children the best chance they can to break out of poverty. Research and studies have shown that poverty has serious effects and implications for those within its grasp, especially children. After examining some research on this subject, I would now like to propose a course of action to help children break out of poverty. The effects of poverty on children are numerous. Familial tension, violence, and less educational opportunities are just a few examples of the effects that these children in poverty face. Poor neighborhoods heighten violence and danger and also provide inadequate education. Schools are the gateway to learning and safe childhood development. Therefore, schools should offer after-school and summer programs that provide educational and learning environments as well as safe sanctuaries to children in need. Studies have shown that poverty increases with income inequality and unemployment. This trend has been reflected in both Asparagus et al.'s and Corcoran and Hill's research. Therefore, steady jobs are extremely important, but with a competitive job market, people need good education. Ratcliffe and McKernan reveal the effects of just what a parental education can have on children in poverty. And poor areas and wealthy areas do not provide the same opportunity for education. Gary W. Evans stated, quote, 27% of high school math teachers in low-income school districts major in mathematics, as opposed to 43% in wealthy school districts. Therefore, there's disparities in education between social classes, which further heightens and perpetuates poverty. Therefore, schools should offer high-level and gifted student classes to provide equal and sufficient opportunity to poor children. But along with the high-level classes, schools need to realize that poor children come from different environments. Evans and LaRoe showed just a few of these effects and different environments that these children can come from. They're more likely to come from broken homes and lack parental support, experience violence and abuse, have less exposure to books and learning, and have less involvement in school activities. Therefore, these schools should offer programs that support their endeavors and reward children for academic achievements. They should promote continual learning and also provide these children the chance to understand the importance of education. Lastly, poor children are more likely to experience abuse and violence. Richard J. Gellis reflected this in his research, where he showed that in 1985, the overall rate of severe violence per 1,000 children in poverty was 154, as opposed to 105 per 1,000 children above the poverty line. This violence and abuse can have psychological effects on children and affect their education. Therefore, gifted programs should offer an escape from abusive and violent environments. Counseling programs like the ones at Harper High School are perfect examples of offering a fostering and a safe environment relationship. Therefore, schools should offer year-round programs that provide children not only with educational opportunities to expand their knowledge, but also a place for them to feel safe to develop as children, and eventually young adults. In summary, poor children need programs that foster learning and also provide the motivation and support they may lack at home. Schools are the prime environment to offer this opportunity to poor children. We often hear about unemployment statistics and the job market on the news, but one issue that can be overlooked is the impact of poverty on children right here in our country. Yang Zhang, Mercedes Okono, and Curtis Skinner stated in their article Basic Facts About Low-Income Children in 2014 for the National Center for Children in Poverty that while children under the age of 18 comprise 23% of the U.S. population, they represent 33% of all people in poverty. Children are the most affected by poverty. As research has shown, these children are at a serious disadvantage, and not only do they suffer in terms of economic means, but they also experience physical and emotional strains such as violence, abuse, and a lack of support. The school system is a prime environment to provide support and help for these children. Schools have the opportunity to not only provide children with the tools to break out of poverty, but to create an environment that supports their endeavors. Children need programs that foster learning and also provide the motivation and support that they may lack at home. After-school and summer programs that support education and growth while providing a safe haven for children are crucial to providing children with the means to break out of poverty. We ought to make the creation and implementation of these programs into school districts a top priority for defeating the cycle of poverty. Children are the future, but without the proper tools, they cannot build a new future for themselves. Thank you.